I caught my husband with my son's fiancée in his downtown office on a Tuesday afternoon in November. But that's not even the worst part. The worst part is what I found tucked inside Isabel's designer handbag when it fell open during their frantic scramble to look decent. An ultrasound photo, 8 weeks along. Let me start from the beginning, because understanding how I ended up standing frozen in my husband's office doorway, watching my entire world collapse, requires knowing who I was before that moment. My name is Catherine Morrison, though everyone calls me Kate. I'm 59 years old, and until 3 months ago, I believed I had a good life. Not perfect, but good. I'd been married to Richard Morrison for 27 years. We lived in a beautiful brownstone in Beacon Hill, one of Boston's most coveted neighborhoods. Our son Daniel was a resident at Massachusetts General Hospital, following in the footsteps of my late father, who'd been a cardiologist there for 40 years. I had retired from teaching high school English 2 years earlier, after 35 years of shaping young minds and grading essays until my eyes crossed. The retirement was supposed to be the beginning of our golden years. Richard and I would travel. I'd finally write that novel I'd been planning since college. We'd grow old together watching the leaves change in the Boston Common. But something had shifted in our marriage over the past year. It was subtle at first, the kind of thing you convince yourself you're imagining. Richard stayed late at the office more frequently. His investment advisory firm had always demanded long hours, but this felt different. He'd come home distracted, his mind clearly elsewhere. When I'd ask about his day, his answers were vague, rehearsed. Then there were the new habits. He'd started going to the gym at odd hours. He bought new clothes, expensive Italian suits that seemed too fashionable for a 61-year-old financial advisor. He changed his cologne. Small things, but together they painted a picture I desperately didn't want to see. The real change began 6 months ago when Daniel brought Isabel Reed home to meet us. I remember that dinner with crystalline clarity. It was a warm May evening, and I'd spent the entire day preparing Daniel's favorite meal, my grandmother's recipe for osso buco. The house smelled of slow-braised veal and fresh herbs. I'd set the dining room table with our good china, the Wedgwood pattern we'd received as a wedding gift and only used for special occasions. Daniel arrived first, his face glowing with happiness I hadn't seen since his medical school graduation. "Mom, Dad, I want you to meet someone very special." Then Isabel walked in, and I watched my husband's face transform. She was stunning in that effortless way that some women possess. 26 years old, with honey blonde hair that fell in perfect waves past her shoulders, green eyes that seemed to sparkle with perpetual amusement, and a smile that could disarm anyone. She wore a simple cream-colored dress that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. And she moved with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no. "Mr. and Mrs. Morrison," she said, extending a delicate hand. "Daniel has told me so much about you. I'm absolutely thrilled to finally meet the people who raised such an incredible man." The words were perfect. Too perfect. But I pushed aside my instinctive wariness and focused on Daniel's happiness. He looked at her like she'd hung the moon. During dinner, I watched her work the room. She complimented the house with specific architectural knowledge that impressed Richard. She asked about my teaching career with seemingly genuine interest. She praised the food effusively, but it was the way she interacted with Richard that made something cold settle in my stomach. She touched his arm when she laughed at his jokes. She leaned in when he spoke, giving him her complete attention in a way that felt intimate, exclusive. She asked detailed questions about his work, his investment strategies, his views on market trends. Richard, who usually kept business talk away from the dinner table, was suddenly animated, expansive, showing off. "Your husband is brilliant," Isabel said to me at one point. But her eyes never left Richard's face. "Daniel told me his father built his firm from nothing. That's so impressive. I'd love to learn more about investment strategy. My family has some money, but we've never had anyone who really understood how to grow it properly." I saw the flash of interest in Richard's eyes. The Reed family was old Boston money, the kind of wealth that came with social standing and connections. Richard had always been ambitious, always reaching for the next rung on the social ladder. "I'd be happy to discuss it with you sometime," Richard said smoothly. "Investment strategy is a passion of mine," Daniel beamed, oblivious to the undercurrents. "Isabel works in PR for a fashion agency downtown. She's brilliant at what she does." Over the following months, Isabel became a fixture in our lives. She and Daniel were inseparable. By August, he'd proposed, and she'd accepted with tears of joy and an Instagram post that garnered thousands of likes. The wedding was set for late November, a lavish affair at the Harborview Grand Hotel that Isabel's parents were paying for. The guest list topped 300 people. The dress was custom Vera Wang. The flowers alone cost more than my first car. Isabel threw herself into planning with manic intensity, and somehow Richard became her primary consultant on everything. "Your father has such good taste," she'd gush when she came over. Often when Daniel was working a shift at the hospital, he helped me choose the most perfect invitations. "Kate, you don't mind if I steal him for a few hours to look at venues, do you?" What could I say? She was going to be my daughter-in-law. Richard was helping with wedding planning. It was thoughtful, fatherly. Except it didn't feel fatherly. It felt wrong. I started noticing things. The way Richard's entire demeanor changed when Isabel called. How he'd smile at his phone before answering. A soft, secret smile I hadn't seen him give me in years. The way he always made time for her, even when he'd canceled our own plans claiming work emergencies. One Saturday in September, I came home from grocery shopping to find them in our living room, sitting too close on the sofa, looking at wedding magazines. They sprang apart when I walked in, guilty expressions flashing across their faces before being replaced with bright, false smiles. "Kate, we were just finalizing the seating chart," Isabel said, her voice a touch too loud. "Your husband is a genius at diplomatic arrangements." Richard stood quickly, straightening his shirt. "I should get back to work. I have a conference call." It was Saturday. He never had conference calls on Saturday. That night, I confronted him. We were getting ready for bed, and I couldn't hold it in anymore. "Richard, is something going on with you and Isabel?" He froze, his hand on his pajama drawer. Then he laughed, but it sounded forced. "What? Kate, that's ridiculous." "She's our son's fiancée. I'm just trying to help make their wedding perfect." "You seem very invested in making it perfect," I said carefully. "More invested than I'd expect." "I'm trying to be supportive," he said, his voice taking on an edge. "Daniel is our only child. This is a big moment for him. I thought you'd appreciate me taking an active role instead of just writing checks." The deflection was masterful. Suddenly, I was the unreasonable one for questioning his motives. I backed down, swallowing my suspicions. What proof did I have? A feeling? Some lingering looks? In 27 years of marriage, Richard had never given me reason to doubt his fidelity. But the feeling didn't go away. It grew stronger, a persistent ache in my chest that kept me awake at night. I started paying closer attention. I noticed Richard's credit card statements showed charges at restaurants we'd never been to together. When I asked about them, he had ready explanations. Client dinners, business lunches, all perfectly reasonable. His phone, which used to sit casually on the kitchen counter, now lived in his pocket. He'd angled away when texting, his body language closed off and secretive. When I'd walk into a room where he was on a call, he'd quickly wrap it up or switch to speakerphone. Suddenly all business. One evening in late October, I was putting away laundry in our bedroom when I found a receipt in Richard's suit pocket. The Newbury, one of Boston's most exclusive boutique hotels. Room service charges for two. Champagne, strawberries, charged to a credit card I didn't recognize. My hands shook as I photographed the receipt with my phone. Then I carefully put it back exactly where I'd found it. That night, I called my best friend Maya Chen. We'd known each other since college, and she was the only person I trusted with this. "I think Richard is having an affair," I said without preamble when she answered. Maya, a clinical psychologist with 30 years of experience reading people, didn't immediately dismiss my concerns. "What makes you think so?" I told her everything. The changed behavior, the strange receipts, the way he was with Isabel. As I spoke, I heard how it sounded. Circumstantial, paranoid, the concerns of a menopausal woman whose husband had simply become involved in planning their son's wedding. But Maya didn't laugh or tell me I was being ridiculous. Instead, she was quiet for a long moment. "Kate," she finally said, her voice serious, "I've known you for 40 years. You're one of the most rational, level-headed people I know. If your gut is telling you something's wrong, there's probably something wrong. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" "I don't know," I admitted. "I don't have proof. Just feelings and a hotel receipt that could be explained away." "Do you want proof?" Maya asked gently. "Because once you have it, you can't unknow it. Your marriage will never be the same, even if you're wrong." I thought about that for a long time. Did I want to know? Wouldn't it be easier to just ignore the signs, to convince myself I was being paranoid, to focus on Daniel's happiness and my upcoming grandmother role? I need to know, I finally said. I can't live like this, always wondering, always suspicious. I need the truth, whatever it is. Then you need to catch him, Maya said. And I know someone who can help. The someone was Robert Torres, a former Boston PD detective who now ran a private investigation firm specializing in domestic cases. Maya had referred several clients to him over the years, patients whose suspicions about cheating spouses needed confirmation before they could move forward. I met Robert at a quiet coffee shop in Cambridge, far from Beacon Hill where someone might recognize me. He was in his mid-50s, with graying hair and kind eyes that had seen too much of humanity's worst behavior. "Mrs. Morrison," he said, shaking my hand. "Maya speaks highly of you. Tell me what's going on." I laid it all out for him. Every suspicion, every odd behavior, every piece of circumstantial evidence. He listened without interrupting, taking notes on a small pad. When I finished, he looked at me seriously. "Before we go any further, I need to be clear about something. If your husband is having an affair and I find proof of it, your life is going to change. Dramatically. Are you prepared for that?" "I'm prepared for the truth," I said. "Whatever it is. And if the affair is with your son's fiancée?" he asked quietly. The question hung in the air. I'd been dancing around that possibility, not quite willing to voice it out loud. But Robert was forcing me to confront it directly. "Is that what you think?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "It's a possibility," he said. "The behavior you're describing, the involvement in wedding planning, the changed grooming habits, the secretiveness, and the fact that the changes coincided with her arrival in your lives. It fits a pattern." I felt sick. "She's 26 years old. She's supposed to marry my son in 6 weeks. "I've seen worse," Robert said grimly. "Much worse. But let's not jump to conclusions. Let me do some preliminary surveillance. I'll follow your husband for a week, document his movements, see if there's anything concrete. Then we'll know what we're dealing with." The cost was substantial, but I had my own retirement account that Richard didn't monitor closely. I'd spent 35 years saving, and now I was spending it to potentially destroy my marriage. The irony wasn't lost on me. "Do it," I said. For the next week, I lived in a state of suspended animation. I went through the motions of normal life, attending Daniel's hospital event, having lunch with friends, planning Thanksgiving dinner. But inside, I was screaming. Richard seemed oblivious. He was busy, distracted, often out of the house. "Big client," he'd say. "Important portfolio to manage." I'd nod and smile and wonder if he could see the knowledge in my eyes that I was having him followed. On day 5 of the surveillance, Robert called me. His voice was tight, controlled. "Mrs. Morrison, I need you to come to my office, today, as soon as possible." "Did you find something?" I asked, my heart hammering. "Yes," he said simply. "And you need to see it in person." I drove to his office in a daze, my hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel. I parked in the underground garage and took the elevator up, each floor feeling like a descent into hell. Robert's office was sparse, professional. He had a laptop set up on his desk, and he gestured for me to sit. His expression was grim. "I'm sorry," he said before showing me anything. "I wish I had better news." He turned the laptop toward me and pressed play on a video file. The footage showed the entrance to a luxury apartment building on Newbury Street. The timestamp indicated it was from 2 days ago at 2:30 p.m. I watched as a familiar figure approached the entrance. Richard, wearing one of his new Italian suits, carrying a bouquet of roses. He didn't go to the main entrance. Instead, he used a key card to access a private side entrance, the kind reserved for residents. He moved with the confidence of someone who'd done this many times before. "He's been going there 3 times a week for the past month," Robert said quietly. "Always in the afternoon. Always stays for 2 to 3 hours. Whose apartment is it?" I asked, though part of me already knew. Robert pulled up another file. "It's leased under the name Isabel Catherine Reed. She's had it for 8 months. The lease payments come from an account that your husband set up for her." The room tilted. I gripped the edge of the desk, trying to breathe. "There's more," Robert said, his voice gentle but firm. He showed me more footage. Isabel arriving at the apartment. Richard arriving 15 minutes later. The two of them leaving together hours later, Isabel's hair mussed, both of them looking satisfied and relaxed. Photos from restaurants, taken with a telephoto lens. Richard and Isabel at intimate corner tables, holding hands across white tablecloths. Richard feeding Isabel a bite of dessert. Isabel laughing at something Richard said, her hand on his thigh under the table. Each image was a knife to my heart. I have 43 separate documented meetings over the past 5 weeks, Robert said. This isn't a one-time mistake, Mrs. Morrison. This is a sustained, deliberate affair. And given that he's paying for her apartment, it's been going on for longer than that. I couldn't speak. I could barely think. My husband and my son's fiancée. For months. While planning a wedding. While pretending to be a supportive father and loving husband. I need you to see one more thing, Robert said carefully. I know this is hard, but you need the full picture. He showed me photos from earlier that day. Isabel leaving the apartment, getting into her car. In her hand was a large envelope. Robert had managed to get a close-up. Through the semi-transparent envelope, I could see the edge of what looked like a medical report. And printed on the corner, barely visible, were the words, OB-GYN Associates. She's pregnant, I whispered. I can't confirm that without more investigation, Robert said. But given the context, the world went dark around the edges. Isabel was pregnant. The wedding was in 6 weeks, and my son had no idea that his fiancée was carrying a baby that might not be his. The drive home from Robert's office is a blur in my memory. Somehow I made it back to Beacon Hill without crashing, though I have no recollection of stoplights or traffic or the route I took. I pulled into our driveway and sat in the car for 20 minutes, staring at the brownstone where I'd lived for 23 years, the home where I'd raised my son, where I'd believed I had a real marriage. Everything looked the same. The carefully maintained facade, the window boxes I'd planted with late-season mums, the brass door knocker I polished every month. From the outside, we were the perfect family. Successful, stable, respectable. But inside, we were rotting from within, poisoned by lies and betrayal. I finally forced myself to go inside. The house was empty. Richard had texted earlier to say he had a late meeting with a client. I wondered if the client's name was Isabel. I wondered if they were in that Newberry Street apartment right now, in bed together, laughing about how oblivious Daniel and I were. The thought made me physically ill. I barely made it to the bathroom before vomiting, my body rejecting the reality I'd just learned. I knelt on the cold tile floor, gasping and shaking, tears streaming down my face. When there was nothing left inside me but emptiness, I stood up and looked at myself in the mirror. My face was blotchy and swollen, my eyes red-rimmed. I looked old, broken, pathetic. I looked exactly like what I was. A woman who'd been made a fool of by her husband and the girl who was supposed to become her daughter-in-law. But as I stared at my reflection, something shifted inside me. The grief and shock began to crystallize into something harder, colder, rage, pure, clarifying rage. They'd done this deliberately. It wasn't a moment of weakness or a drunken mistake. This was calculated, sustained, planned. Richard had set up an apartment for her. He'd been stealing from our joint accounts to fund their affair. He'd sat at our dinner table, looked Daniel in the eye, and helped plan a wedding he knew was built on lies, and Isabel. She'd smiled at me, called me Kate with false affection, pretended to value my opinion on flower arrangements and bridesmaid dresses. All while sleeping with my husband. All while possibly carrying his child and preparing to marry our son. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. I washed my face with cold water and made a decision. I wasn't going to fall apart. I wasn't going to confront them in a tearful, emotional confrontation where they could gaslight me and twist the narrative. I was going to be smart. I was going to gather every piece of evidence, document every lie, and when the time came, I was going to destroy them both. But first, I needed to know about the pregnancy. Everything hinged on that. If Isabel was carrying Richard's child, this wasn't just infidelity. It was a biological time bomb that would explode Daniel's life in the most devastating way possible. I called Robert Torres back. My voice was steady now, cold. I need you to find out about the pregnancy, I said, without preamble. I need to know if she's pregnant, how far along, and if there's any way to determine paternity before the baby is born. Mrs. Morrison, Robert said carefully, what you're asking me to do ventures into legally gray areas. I can't break into medical offices or hack health records. I'm not asking you to break the law, I said. But you're an investigator. You know how to find information. Find it. Whatever it costs, I'll pay. There was a long pause. Give me 48 hours, he finally said. I have some contacts, but Kate, I have to ask, what are you planning to do with this information? I don't know yet, I admitted. But I need all the facts before I decide anything. My son's entire future is at stake. After hanging up with Robert, I spent the next 2 hours going through our financial records with the kind of forensic attention to detail that only a former high school English teacher could muster. If Richard was funding an affair, there would be traces. There always were. I started with our joint checking account, the one we used for household expenses. Everything looked normal at first glance. Regular payments for utilities, groceries, insurance. But as I went back further, patterns emerged. Small cash withdrawals, $300 here, $500 there, always from different ATMs around the city. Never enough to be alarming, but consistent. Over the past 8 months, they totaled nearly $40,000. Then I checked our investment accounts, the portfolios Richard managed for us. We should have had approximately $1.2 million saved for retirement, the fruit of decades of careful planning and my teacher's pension contributions. But when I logged into the account, the balance showed only $890,000. Over $300,000 was missing. My hands trembled as I clicked through the transaction history. There it was, buried in pages of legitimate trades and transfers. A series of withdrawals categorized as portfolio rebalancing and alternative investment opportunities, all approved with Richard's electronic signature. All completely fraudulent. He'd stolen over $300,000 from our retirement to fund his affair with a woman 33 years younger than him. Money I'd contributed to, money that was supposed to ensure our security in old age. He'd gambled our entire future on a girl young enough to be his daughter. I took screenshots of everything and emailed them to myself at an address Richard didn't know about. Then I forwarded them to Robert Torres with a subject line that simply read, "More evidence." Richard came home at 9:30 that night, loosening his tie as he walked through the door. He looked relaxed, satisfied, happy in a way I hadn't seen him look in months when he was with me. "Sorry I'm late," he said, kissing my cheek with casual affection that now felt like a violation. The Henderson account needed immediate attention. Market volatility, you know how it is. I wondered if the Henderson account was code for Isabel. I wondered if her perfume was still on his shirt, if he'd showered at her apartment before coming home to me. "I saved you some dinner," I said, my voice perfectly normal. "It's in the fridge. You're an angel," he said, smiling. "What would I do without you? Die alone and penniless after I take everything from you in the divorce," I thought. But what I said was, "You'd manage, I'm sure." He microwaved the leftover chicken marsala I'd made and ate it standing at the kitchen counter, scrolling through his phone. His real phone, the one I knew about. I wondered if he had a second phone for Isabel, a burner that couldn't be traced back to him. "Big day tomorrow," he said between bites. "Daniel and Isabel are coming over to finalize the rehearsal dinner plans. You remembered, right?" I'd completely forgotten. In the chaos of discovering my husband's betrayal, I'd forgotten that tomorrow evening. My son and his cheating fiancée would be sitting at our dining table, discussing their wedding plans while I smiled and pretended everything was fine. "Of course I remembered," I lied. "I'm making my lasagna." "Perfect," Richard said. "Isabel loves your lasagna. She was just saying the other day how lucky Daniel is to have such a wonderful mother." The hypocrisy was so staggering, I almost laughed. Instead, I excused myself and went upstairs, claiming a headache. I couldn't bear to be in the same room with him for another moment. That night, I lay in bed next to my husband of 27 years and listened to him sleep. He snored softly, peacefully, without a care in the world. Why would he have cares? He had everything. A devoted wife managing his home, a mistress in a luxury apartment, a son who worshipped him, a carefully constructed life where he could have his cake and eat it too. But not for much longer. The next morning, I woke up with a strange sense of clarity. I made coffee, read the Boston Globe, went for my usual morning walk along the Charles River. To anyone watching, I was just Kate Morrison, retired teacher, enjoying her autumn morning. No one could see the war plans forming in my mind. Robert Torres called at 10 a.m. "I have information," he said. "Can you meet?" We met at the same Cambridge coffee shop. This time, Robert looked even grimmer than before. "Isabel Reed is 12 weeks pregnant," he said, sliding a folder across the table to me. "I have a contact at the OB/GYN practice she's using. This is a copy of her prenatal records." I opened the folder with shaking hands. There it was, medical documentation of the pregnancy. 12 weeks. I did the math quickly in my head. 12 weeks ago was late August, right around the time Daniel and Isabel got engaged. Can we determine paternity? I asked. Not definitively without a court order or consent, Robert said. But there are non-invasive prenatal paternity tests that can be done as early as 8 weeks. They require blood samples from the mother and potential fathers, which we don't have access to, I said. Not yet, Robert agreed. But Kate, I did some more digging. Isabel had a consultation with a different OB practice 6 weeks ago. She wanted information about paternity testing. She's clearly uncertain about who the father is. The implications hit me like a freight train. Isabel didn't know if the baby was Daniel's or Richard's. She was going ahead with the wedding, gambling that she could pass the child off as Daniel's regardless of the biological truth. There's something else, Robert continued. I found evidence that Isabel has been researching Richard's net worth. She's been on financial disclosure sites, looking up property records, checking his business filings. This isn't just an affair, Kate. I think she's been planning this from the beginning. Planning what? I asked, though I was starting to understand. A con, Robert said bluntly. I think she targeted your family deliberately. Rich, successful, socially connected. She seduced your husband to get access to money and information. She got engaged to your son to secure her position. And now she's pregnant, which means regardless of paternity, she's locked into your family financially for life. I felt dizzy. You're saying she's a gold digger? I'm saying she's smarter and more dangerous than a simple gold digger, Robert said. I did a background check. Isabel Reed's family money? It doesn't exist. Her father declared bankruptcy 5 years ago. Her mother's boutique closed last year with massive debts. The fancy address she gave your son? She was house-sitting for a family friend. Everything about her life is an elaborate lie. The coffee shop seemed to spin around me. Daniel doesn't know any of this. No, Robert confirmed. She's been very careful. But Kate, there's more. I found evidence that Isabel has been involved in similar situations before. Different cities, different wealthy families. She's a professional. This is what she does. I closed my eyes, trying to process this new dimension of betrayal. My husband wasn't just cheating with a young woman. He was being conned by a career criminal who deliberately infiltrated our family. And my son, my innocent, brilliant son, was about to marry her. I need to tell Daniel, I said. Not yet, Robert said urgently. Think about it. If you tell him now, what evidence do you have? He's in love with her. She'll deny everything. Your husband will back her up to save himself. It'll be your word against theirs, and you'll be labeled the hysterical, jealous mother trying to ruin her son's happiness. He was right. Daniel was a surgeon, trained in evidence-based medicine. He'd need proof, not accusations. And right now, while I had plenty of proof of the affair, I didn't have definitive proof that Isabel was conning him or that the baby might not be his. So what do I do? I asked, feeling helpless. We wait, Robert said. The wedding is in 5 weeks. We use that time to gather every piece of evidence. Financial records, DNA if we can get it, documented proof of her pattern of behavior. We build an airtight case, and then, when we have everything we need, we blow it all up at once. Public, documented, undeniable. At the wedding, I said slowly. Robert nodded. It's the nuclear option. Brutal, public, devastating. But it's the only way to ensure they can't spin the narrative or manipulate the situation. With 300 witnesses, there's no room for denial. The thought of doing that to Daniel, of destroying his wedding day, made me feel sick. But what was the alternative? Let him marry a con artist who was carrying a baby that might be his grandfather's child? Watch him raise another man's baby while being systematically robbed by a professional grifter? I need more time to think, I said. You have 5 weeks, Robert said. Use them wisely. That afternoon, I made lasagna in my kitchen while my mind raced through scenarios and possibilities. At 6 p.m., Daniel arrived, still in his scrubs from the hospital. He hugged me tightly, and I held on to him, memorizing the feel of his embrace. My son. My beautiful, brilliant, trusting son who had no idea his world was about to explode. Isabel arrived 15 minutes later, perfectly coiffed and made up, wearing a designer dress that probably cost more than Daniel's monthly rent. She kissed my cheek and complimented the house's smell, the fall decorations, my hair. Every word felt like a lie now that I knew the truth. Richard came home at 6:30, and I watched him greet Isabel with a careful, distant politeness that was itself a tell. He was being too formal, too careful not to show any familiarity. It was the behavior of someone with something to hide. We sat down to dinner, and I served lasagna while they discussed wedding details. The rehearsal dinner menu, the seating chart, the timeline for photographs. Every word felt surreal, like I was trapped in a play where I was the only one who'd read ahead to the tragic ending. "Mom, you're quiet tonight," Daniel observed. "Are you feeling okay?" "Just a little tired," I lied. "Wedding planning is exhausting." "Only 4 more weeks," Isabel said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. Her touch made my skin crawl. "I can't wait to officially be part of this family. You've all been so wonderful to me." I looked at Richard. His jaw was tight, his expression carefully neutral, but I saw the muscle twitching in his cheek, the telltale sign that he was stressed. Good. He should be stressed. His entire world was balanced on a knife's edge, and he didn't even know it. After dinner, while Daniel and Richard discussed sports in the living room, Isabel followed me into the kitchen to help with dishes. "Kate," she said softly, loading plates into the dishwasher. "Can I tell you something? Just between us?" My heart rate spiked. "Of course." She took a deep breath, her hand unconsciously moving to her still flat stomach. "I'm pregnant. 12 weeks. We haven't told Daniel yet. I wanted to wait until after the wedding, to have that be our special day before everything changes with a baby." The audacity of this lie, delivered with such false intimacy, nearly broke my composure. She was telling me about the pregnancy, spinning it as Daniel's child, creating a narrative before I could question it. "That's wonderful news," I managed to say, my voice steady despite the rage boiling inside me. "Daniel will be thrilled." "I know," she said, her eyes shining with false tears. "He's going to be such an amazing father, just like Richard." "You're so lucky, Kate, to have such an incredible husband. He's been like a father figure to me these past months. I don't know what I'd do without his guidance." The double meaning in her words was clear. She was taunting me, confident that I suspected nothing. She thought she'd won. "Yes," I said quietly. "Richard is certainly one of a kind." That night, after Daniel and Isabel left, after Richard went to bed claiming exhaustion, I sat alone in my home office and made a decision. Robert Torres was right. The only way to end this was with overwhelming public, undeniable proof. I needed to catch them together in a way that couldn't be explained away, and I knew exactly how to do it. I picked up my phone and called Robert. "I need you to put cameras in Richard's office," I said. "Hidden cameras with audio. And I need you to create a situation where they meet there when I can walk in on them." "Kate," Robert said cautiously, "that's risky. If they catch us—" "They won't," I interrupted, "because I'm going to be the one who walks in. I'm going to catch them in the act, and I'm going to have video evidence to back it up. Can you do it?" There was a long pause. "Yes," he finally said, "but we need to be smart about this. Let me set it up properly. Give me 3 days." 3 days, I agreed, "and then we end this." I hung up and sat in the darkness of my office, listening to the old house settle around me. Somewhere upstairs, my husband slept peacefully, dreaming whatever dreams adulterers dream. In a luxury apartment across town, my son's fiancée probably lay awake, calculating her next move, confident in her deception. They had no idea what was coming. They'd played me for a fool, underestimated the quiet English teacher who'd spent her life in the background of other people's stories. But I was done being a supporting character in my own life. It was time to write a different ending. The 3 days Robert needed to set up the surveillance felt like 3 years. I moved through my life like a ghost, attending a charity luncheon with friends who had no idea my marriage was disintegrating, shopping for Christmas gifts I'd probably never give, smiling and nodding through conversations I didn't hear. Richard was oblivious to my internal state. Why wouldn't he be? I'd spent 27 years being the perfect wife, the steady, reliable Kate who never made waves or asked difficult questions. He had no reason to think anything had changed. On the second day, Maya came over for coffee. She took one look at my face and knew something was wrong. "What happened?" she asked, closing my front door and following me into the kitchen. "You look like you haven't slept in days." I told her everything. The surveillance photos, the affair, the pregnancy, Isabel's criminal history, the missing retirement money. Maya listened without interrupting, her psychologist's face carefully neutral, but I could see the horror building in her eyes. "Kate," she said when I finished, "this is so much worse than we thought. That poor boy. Daniel has no idea what he's walking into." "I'm going to tell him," I said. "But not yet. Not until I have proof so overwhelming he can't deny it or rationalize it away." "When?" Maya asked. "Soon," I said. "Very soon. On the third day, Robert called. Everything's set up. Richard's office is wired with 3 hidden cameras, full audio and video. The footage streams directly to a secure server. I have a plan to get them both there tomorrow afternoon. Tell me, I said. I created a fake email from a supposed investment client requesting an urgent meeting. The email went to Richard's work account. It mentions a $5 million portfolio that needs immediate attention. It's too big for him to ignore. And Isabel? I asked. I sent her a text from a burner phone pretending to be Richard. It says he needs to see her urgently at his office at 2:30 p.m., that he has news about their future. She'll come. How do you know she'll believe it's from him? Because I've been monitoring their communication, Robert said. I know exactly how he texts her, what pet names he uses, the tone. She won't question it. And me? I asked. You show up at 2:45, claiming you were in the neighborhood and wanted to surprise Richard with lunch. You have every right to walk into your husband's office. And when you do, we'll have everything on camera. My hands were shaking. What if they hear me coming? What if they stop before I get there? The office door is heavy, and Richard's private office is in the back. They won't hear you until you're right there. Trust me, Kate, this will work. That night, I barely slept. I lay next to Richard, listening to him breathe, wondering what was going through his mind. Did he feel guilty? Did he think about Daniel? Or was he so caught up in his midlife crisis that he'd lost all sense of morality? At breakfast the next morning, he seemed distracted, checking his phone repeatedly. Big day? I asked, pouring his coffee. Could be, he said. Potential new client. Very wealthy. If I land this account, it could be transformative for the firm. I wondered if he was already planning how to spend money he'd never actually received from this fictional client. I wondered if he'd buy Isabel more gifts, rent her a bigger apartment, or maybe finally leave me for her once he thought he had enough money to make it worthwhile. Good luck, I said, kissing his cheek. His aftershave smelled expensive. New. Another change I'd noticed, but hadn't questioned until it was too late. After Richard left for work, I spent the morning in a state of controlled panic. I tried to read but couldn't focus. I tried to watch television but couldn't follow the plot. Finally, I gave up and just sat in my living room, watching the clock tick closer to 2:30. At 2:15, I got in my car and drove downtown. My hands were steady on the wheel, but inside I was screaming. Part of me still hoped this was all a terrible mistake, that I'd walk into Richard's office and find him alone, working on legitimate business, and we'd laugh about my paranoia later, but I knew better. The surveillance photos didn't lie. The financial records didn't lie. And in less than 30 minutes, I'd have confirmation that would destroy my marriage and possibly my son's future. I parked in the garage beneath Richard's building at 2:35. I'd deliberately arrived late, wanting to give them time to be comfortable, to drop their guard. I took the elevator to the 14th floor, my heels clicking on the marble as I walked toward Morrison Investment Advisory. The reception area was empty. Richard's assistant, Linda, usually worked until 5, but according to Robert's research, she took a long lunch break every Tuesday. Richard scheduled his meetings with Isabel around Linda's absence. He'd thought of everything. I walked through the silent office, past the empty cubicles and conference rooms, toward Richard's private office in the corner. The door was closed, but I could hear voices inside, muffled, intimate voices. I pulled out my phone and opened the app Robert had installed, the one that gave me access to the hidden camera feeds. On the screen, I could see them clearly. Richard sat on the edge of his desk, and Isabel stood between his legs, her hands on his shoulders. They were kissing, and his hands were under her blouse. I can't believe we only have 3 more weeks, Isabel was saying. 3 more weeks of sneaking around like this? I know, Richard said, kissing her neck. But after the wedding, things will be different. We'll figure out how to be together properly. What about Kate? Isabel asked. And Daniel? We'll handle it, Richard said. Once you're officially part of the family, once there's a baby, everything changes. They'll have to accept us. And if they don't, well, I have enough money put aside that we can start fresh somewhere new. The money you took from your retirement account? Isabel asked, and I could hear the calculation in her voice. That and more, Richard said. I've been moving assets around for months, setting things up. Kate has no idea about half of what we're worth. By the time the divorce is finalized, I'll have secured enough that we'll be comfortable. They were planning this. Not just the affair, but my financial destruction. Richard was systematically hiding assets, preparing to divorce me while making sure I got as little as possible. And Isabel was helping him, probably taking a cut of the stolen money. The rage that filled me in that moment was unlike anything I'd ever felt. It was cold, clarifying, absolute. I saved the video footage to my phone, took a deep breath, and opened the door. They sprang apart like guilty teenagers. Richard's face went from flushed satisfaction to white shock in an instant. Isabel made a small sound, somewhere between a gasp and a whimper. "Kate," Richard stammered. "This isn't what it looks like," I laughed. It was a harsh, bitter sound that didn't sound like me at all. "Really, Richard? Because it looks like you're groping our son's pregnant fiancée in your office while planning how to steal my money and run away with her." Isabel's hand flew to her stomach, her face pale. "How did you know about the pregnancy?" I finished for her. "I know everything, Isabel. I know about the apartment Richard bought for you. I know about the $300,000 he stole from our retirement. I know about your fake family background and your history of targeting wealthy families. I know everything. You're crazy," Isabel said, but her voice lacked conviction. "You're a jealous, paranoid old woman who can't accept that your son found someone who makes him happy. And you're a con artist," I said calmly. "A good one, I'll admit. You had me fooled for a while. You almost had Daniel fooled forever. But here's the thing about con artists, Isabel. You get cocky. You make mistakes. And you made several." Richard found his voice. "Kate, let's talk about this rationally. You're upset, and you have every right to be. But there's an explanation for all of this that's not what you think." "Oh, I'd love to hear the explanation," I said. "Please, tell me how you accidentally fell into a months-long affair with our son's fiancée. Tell me how you accidentally stole $300,000 from our retirement. Tell me how you accidentally helped her get pregnant with a baby that might be yours instead of Daniel's. I'm all ears." The color drained from Richard's face. "What do you mean, might be mine?" I turned to Isabel. "You didn't tell him? That's interesting. You told me you were 12 weeks pregnant and implied the baby was Daniel's. But you were consulting with OB/GYNs about paternity testing. Why would you need paternity testing if you were certain Daniel was the father?" Isabel's mask finally cracked. The sweet, vulnerable girl disappeared, replaced by something cold and calculating. "You can't prove anything?" "Actually, I can," I said. I pulled out my phone and held it up, showing the paused video feed from moments before. "I have video and audio of everything you just said. Your plans to divorce me, steal my money, and run away together. All documented. All admissible in court." Richard lurched forward, reaching for my phone. "Give me that." I stepped back smoothly. "Don't touch me. This footage is already backed up to a secure server. You can't destroy it. It's over, Richard. All of it." For a long moment, no one moved. Then Isabel grabbed her purse and bolted for the door. I didn't try to stop her. She couldn't run far enough to escape what was coming. Richard sank into his desk chair, his head in his hands. "Kate, please. We need to talk about this. Now you want to talk?" I asked. "After months of lying? After stealing from me? Betraying Daniel? Destroying our family? Now you think we should talk?" "I never meant for it to go this far," he said, and to my surprise, there were tears in his eyes. "It started as just attraction, just flattery from a beautiful young woman. I was stupid, weak, but then it became something more, and I couldn't find a way out. You could have told the truth," I said. "At any point in the last 6 months, you could have been honest. You could have ended it before Daniel got engaged. You could have stopped before stealing our retirement money. But you didn't. You made choices, Richard. You made them every single day. And now you're going to face the consequences. What are you going to do?" he asked, his voice small. "I'm going to tell Daniel everything," I said. "Every lie, every betrayal, every stolen dollar. I'm going to show him the evidence. And then I'm going to file for divorce and make sure you never see a penny of my money again." "He'll never forgive you," Richard said desperately. "If you tell him you'll destroy his wedding, his happiness. He'll blame you for ruining his life." "No," I said quietly. "He'll blame you. Because you're the one who did this. Not me. You." I turned and walked out of the office, leaving my husband of 27 years sitting in the wreckage of his own making. My hands didn't shake until I was in the elevator. Then the reality of what I'd just done, what I was about to do, hit me like a wave. I sat in my car in the parking garage and called Daniel. He answered on the second ring, his voice cheerful and unsuspecting. "Hey, Mom, what's up?" "Daniel," I said, and my voice broke despite my best efforts. "I need you to come home, right now. There's something you need to know." "Mom? Are you okay? You sound upset." "I'm fine," I lied. "But this can't wait. Please, can you come home now?" I'm in the middle of rounds, but if it's urgent, I can get someone to cover for me. Should I bring Isabel? No, I said firmly. Just you. This is just for you. There was a pause. You're scaring me, Mom. I know, sweetheart. I'm sorry. But please, just come home. An hour later, Daniel walked through the front door of our Beacon Hill brownstone. He was still in his hospital scrubs, worry etched across his face. I was sitting in the living room, my laptop open on the coffee table, ready to show him everything. Mom, what's going on? He asked, sitting beside me. You look terrible. Are you sick? Is something wrong with Dad? Something's wrong with all of us, I said. I took his hand. Daniel, what I'm about to show you is going to hurt. It's going to change everything, but you need to see it. You need to know the truth before you marry Isabel. His face went pale. What truth? I turned the laptop toward him. Your father and Isabel have been having an affair. For months. And there's more. I showed him everything. The surveillance photos of them entering the apartment building. The financial records showing the stolen retirement money. The footage from earlier that day in Richard's office. Daniel watched in silence, his face expressionless, but I could see his hands shaking. When it was over, he sat back, staring at nothing. This isn't real, he whispered. This is a mistake. There's an explanation. There's no explanation, I said gently. I'm sorry, Daniel. I wish there were, but your father admitted it. Isabel didn't even try to deny it. The baby, Daniel said suddenly. She told me she's pregnant. 3 days ago, she told me we're having a baby. My heart broke for him. I know. But Daniel, she doesn't know if it's yours or your father's. She was researching paternity tests. He stood up abruptly, pacing the room like a caged animal. No, she wouldn't do that. She loves me. We're getting married in 3 weeks. We're having a baby. This is just Dad being Dad, having some stupid midlife crisis, and Isabel probably felt pressured or confused, but it doesn't mean— Daniel, I interrupted gently. Stop. I know you want to find a way to make this okay, to explain it away. But you can't. This is real. Your father stole from us to set up an apartment for your fiancée. They've been planning a future together. This isn't a confused mistake. It's a deliberate betrayal. He stopped pacing and turned to look at me, and the pain in his eyes nearly destroyed me. What am I supposed to do, Mom? The wedding is in 3 weeks. 300 people are invited. Isabel's parents spent $150,000 on this wedding. What do I do? You cancel it, I said firmly. You call off the wedding, and you demand a paternity test before that baby is born. And you start the process of rebuilding your life. Everyone will know, he said, his voice breaking. Everyone at the hospital, all our friends, her family. Everyone will know I was cheated on with my own father. I know, I said softly, and I'm so sorry. But the alternative is worse. The alternative is marrying her, raising a baby that might not be yours, and living a lie for the rest of your life. Daniel sank back onto the couch, his head in his hands. For a long moment he was silent. Then he looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes that held a mixture of devastation and something else I couldn't quite identify. Rage, perhaps, or a profound sense of betrayal that went deeper than romantic heartbreak. Where's Dad now? He asked, his voice hoarse. I don't know, I said. Still at his office, probably. Or maybe with Isabel. I need to talk to him, Daniel said, standing up abruptly. I need to hear this from him. Daniel, wait, I started. But he was already heading for the door. I need to hear him say it, Mom, Daniel said. And the anger in his voice was finally breaking through the shock. I need to look him in the eye and ask him how he could do this to us. To me, his own son. He left before I could stop him. I sat alone in the living room, my phone clutched in my hand, terrified of what would happen when father and son came face to face. I thought about calling the police, worried that Daniel's rage might push him to do something he'd regret. But this confrontation had to happen. Daniel needed to face his father, needed to hear the truth directly from the man who'd raised him, and then betrayed him in the most devastating way possible. I called Maya. Daniel just left to confront Richard, I said. I'm scared of what might happen. Do you think Daniel would hurt him? Maya asked, her psychologist's voice calm and assessing. I don't know, I admitted. I've never seen him this angry. He's always been so controlled, so rational. But this might break him. Or it might save him, Maya said. Sometimes we need to express our rage before we can begin to heal. Stay by your phone. If Daniel needs you, he'll call. 2 hours felt like 2 days. I paced the house, unable to sit still, jumping at every sound. I made tea I didn't drink. I turned on the television and immediately turned it off. I checked my phone every 30 seconds, willing it to ring. Finally, at 8:47 p.m., I heard Daniel's car in the driveway. I rushed to the front door and opened it before he could use his key. The sight of him stopped me cold. His right hand was bruised and swelling, the knuckles split and bleeding. There was a wild look in his eyes, but also something calmer, more resolved than when he'd left. He looked like he'd walked through fire and come out the other side, fundamentally changed. "What happened?" I asked, pulling him inside and immediately going for the first aid kit. "I went to his office," Daniel said, his voice eerily flat as he sat at the kitchen table and let me examine his hand. He was still there, sitting at his desk like nothing had happened, like he hadn't just destroyed our entire family. I gently cleaned the blood from his knuckles with antiseptic. He didn't even flinch. "Tell me what happened." I walked in, Daniel continued, staring at nothing. He looked up and had the nerve to smile. "Daniel," he said, "I'm glad you came. We need to talk about this situation rationally." Situation. Like it was a business problem to be solved. I wrapped his hand in gauze, staying silent, letting him tell it at his own pace. I asked him if it was true. All of it. The affair, the money, the apartment, the planning to leave you. He tried to justify it at first. Said he loved Isabel, that sometimes these things just happen, that the heart wants what it wants. Daniel's voice turned bitter. The heart wants what it wants. That's what he said. Like he was the victim of some romantic inevitability, instead of a man who chose to betray his wife and seduce his son's fiancée. "What did you say?" I asked softly. I told him she was pregnant. Asked him if the baby was his. Daniel's jaw clenched. "You know what he said? He said he didn't know, but it didn't matter. That love transcends biology. That if the baby was mine, it would still be raised in a loving home. With him and Isabel, together, my blood ran cold." "He actually said that?" "He had it all planned out, Mom. He was going to divorce you, marry Isabel after a respectful period, and they'd help me raise my child. We'd be one big happy modern family." He actually used those words. Modern family. Like this was some progressive arrangement instead of the sickest betrayal I can imagine. "What did you do?" I asked, though the evidence was literally in my hands as I taped the gauze. I asked him if he remembered teaching me to ride a bike, Daniel said, and his voice finally cracked with emotion. "When I was 6 years old, in the park near our old apartment. I fell and scraped my knee and I cried. He picked me up and said, 'Morrison men don't quit. We face things head on, with integrity.' Do you remember that phrase? He used to say it all the time. Morrison men have integrity." Tears were streaming down Daniel's face now, but his voice remained steady. I asked him where his integrity was when he was sleeping with my fiancée, where his integrity was when he was stealing from his wife, where his Morrison integrity went. Daniel looked at me then, and I saw the boy he'd been and the man he'd become, both present in that moment. He didn't have an answer for that. He just sat there, looking old and pathetic and caught. "So you hit him," I said. "So I hit him," Daniel confirmed, right across his lying face. He fell back in his chair, and I thought I might hit him again. I wanted to. God, Mom. I wanted to beat him until he felt even a fraction of the pain he'd caused. But I didn't, because I realized something in that moment. "What?" I asked. He wasn't worth it. He wasn't worth destroying my career over, or my integrity, or my future. He'd already taken my fiancé, my trust, my wedding, my father. I wasn't going to let him take my character, too. Daniel flexed his injured hand carefully, so I told him he was no longer my father, that as far as I was concerned, Richard Morrison died today. And then I left. We sat in silence for several minutes. Then Daniel spoke again, quieter now. I called Isabel on the way home. She answered on the first ring, like she'd been waiting. Started crying immediately, saying it was all a mistake, that Dad had manipulated her, that she loved me, that the baby was definitely mine. He laughed bitterly. Funny how she was so certain about paternity suddenly. When I told her I knew she'd been researching paternity tests, she changed tactics. Started screaming that you'd poisoned me against her, that you were jealous of her youth and beauty, that this was all your fault. "Daniel," I told her the wedding was canceled, he continued, that I wanted nothing to do with her, that if the baby is mine, we'll arrange custody through lawyers, but I would never, ever trust her again. She begged, she cried, she threatened to kill herself. When none of that worked, she told me I'd regret this, that I was throwing away the best thing that ever happened to me. Daniel's smile was cold. I told her the best thing that ever happened to me was finding out who she really was before I married her. Then I hung up. I pulled my son into my arms and held him while he finally, fully broke down. His sobs shook both of us, 28 years of trust and love for his father shattering in real time. I cried too, for the family we'd been, for the innocence we'd lost, for the pain my beautiful boy was enduring. I'm so sorry, I whispered into his hair, the way I used to when he was small and had nightmares. I'm so sorry you had to go through this. You saved me, Mom, he said through his tears, pulling back to look at me. If you hadn't if you hadn't been brave enough to investigate and confront them, I would have married her. I would have spent my whole life living a lie. You saved my entire life. The next few weeks were brutal. Daniel moved back home temporarily, not ready to be alone in the apartment he'd shared with Isabel. Richard moved out permanently, taking a room at the Boston Harbor Hotel while I filed for divorce. My attorney, armed with Robert Torres's evidence, ensured the divorce would be swift and decidedly in my favor. The wedding was canceled with a brief announcement citing personal reasons. The gossip was immediate and vicious. Boston society thrives on scandal, and we gave them a feast. But I didn't care. Let them talk. The truth was far more interesting than whatever they imagined. Isabel disappeared from Boston entirely. According to Maya, who had connections everywhere, she'd moved to Miami, presumably to start fresh with a new identity and new targets. The baby situation resolved itself when Isabel contacted Daniel's lawyer, requesting child support before the baby was even born. The lawyer demanded a prenatal paternity test. She refused and broke off contact. We never heard from her again. I suspect the baby, if it even existed, was neither Daniel's nor Richard's, but a third man entirely. Perhaps the real father had emerged, or perhaps the pregnancy had been another lie in a long series of lies. Richard tried to reconcile, sending flowers, cards, long emails explaining and apologizing. I ignored all of it. Our divorce was finalized in March, and I got the house, 70% of our assets, and my full retirement account restored with interest. Richard's reputation was destroyed. Most of his clients left when word spread about the embezzlement and affair. His firm dissolved 6 months later. Daniel threw himself into his work, spending 70 hours a week at the hospital. He went to therapy, processing the trauma of the betrayal. Slowly, painfully, he began to heal. He started dating again after a year, moving carefully, trusting slowly. As for me, I sold the Beacon Hill brownstone. Too many ghosts. I bought a smaller place in Cambridge near Maya and started the next chapter of my life. I finally wrote that novel I'd been planning, a thriller about a woman who discovers her husband's secret life. It was cathartic. It was also surprisingly good. I found an agent who loved it. 2 years after that terrible Tuesday in Richard's office, Daniel called me from the hospital. "Mom," he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "I have someone I want you to meet. Her name is Rebecca. She's a pediatric oncology nurse. She's kind and honest, and I think you're going to love her." "I can't wait to meet her," I said, and I meant it. That evening, I sat on my Cambridge balcony, watching the sun set over the Charles River, and thought about the woman I used to be. The one who'd spent 27 years being the perfect wife, who'd ignored her instincts, who'd been too afraid to rock the boat. She was gone now, replaced by someone stronger, harder, more self-assured. I'd lost my marriage, my retirement plan, and my son's wedding. But I'd gained something more valuable, the knowledge that I could survive the worst betrayal imaginable and come out stronger on the other side. My name is Catherine Morrison. I caught my husband with my son's fiancée, and it destroyed my family. But it also freed us to build something better, something honest, something real, and that, in the end, was worth everything. If this story touched you, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support helps me continue sharing stories that uncover the hidden truths of everyday life. There are many more waiting to be told. Thank you in advance for being here. Now tell me, what would you do in this person's place? I'd love to hear your thoughts, so please share them with me in the comments. I'm always curious to know what you all think. With heartfelt gratitude, until next time, Mrs. Clara.